So in today's video, I want to talk about ways you can control the time of execution of your code in JavaScript. There are two main functions for this one. The first one that we're going to look at is called setTimeout. And this setTimeout, you might have heard of it, takes in a handler, right? So it's just a function callback that is going to be called after a certain amount of time has passed. So here you can create an anonymous function, or even an arrow function for that matter. And let's just console log something. Console log, I don't know, delayed hello world, I guess. Let's do that. And as a second parameter, this guy will take the number of milliseconds that this function should execute after getting to the setTimeout line, right? So after the interpreter gets to here, it's going to execute this function after, well, however many milliseconds we're gonna give it here. So for example, we can give it 1000 milliseconds, which is going to be equal to 1 second. So if we try to run this, as you can see, it waited 1 second and then it actually printed delayed hello world on the screen. If we want to make sure that this guy is delayed, we can actually print, for example, a test here. And if this guy prints first, it means that this function has been delayed by whatever amount is in here. So if I run this again, you'll notice I first get test, even though we've run the setTimeout function, and then I get the delayed hello world. Now, a really important feature about the setTimeout function that many overlook is that this guy actually returns a handler for the timeout itself. So if I, for example, say let tm equals setTimeout, this handler can be used to actually clear the timeout. So when we say, for example, that we're going to start this timeout, how do we actually stop it, right? We don't want it to execute anymore. Well, that's simple. We can just do clear timeout, and we can just pass in this return value of the setTimeout. And if I run this now, you'll notice it no longer waits 1 second and no longer prints this delayed hello world, because I started it and stopped it right away, right? So if you stop it right before it finishes executing, then you actually don't get anything executed on the screen. So that's nice. That's really amazing. So basically what you can do with this is you can control whenever this code inside this function executes, after how many seconds you want this to execute. Now this can be useful when, for example, you're doing calls to an already overloaded server that you don't have access to, right? So you can actually just set a timeout. If you're doing multiple calls, that's really helpful. You can just set a timeout for every single call and just adjust it so as you don't get as many fails as usual. Sure, that's just a workaround, but it should get the job done. Now the second function I want to take a look at is called setInterval. And setInterval, like the setTimeout function, also takes in a callback function. So I can just say here, yeah, let's use an arrow function this time, why not? Right, so we can use an arrow function without hesitation. The difference between setTimeout and setInterval is that setTimeout executes the code only once. So after 1 second has passed, boom, it executes and it's done. setInterval, on the other hand, after 1 second has passed, it's going to execute, and then after another second has passed, it's going to execute again and again and again and again, and keeps on going, right? So this can be used in certain situations. I just want you to be aware of this so that you don't start using setTimeout and create timeouts over and over and over again, as that will be quite CPU intensive. Okay, so we can simply console log something here. Let's say, I don't know, recurring hello world, why not? And here we can give it, like, for example, 1000 milliseconds, as we did with the previous one. And that's about it. If you try to run this, so let me clear the screen, you'll notice it's going to keep on executing every single second this line of code. So simple enough. We don't get anything else. I'm just going to kill it. Now, as with the setTimeout function, you can actually get a handler to this interval. So I can say let, let's say int from interval. I know that's not the best name I came up with, but let's continue. So we have this interval, and what we can do with it is maybe after 10 seconds has passed, we can actually clear this interval. So let's create a timeout here. That what it does is simply say clear interval of int, and that is going to clear the interval that we have created after, well, let's say I want 5 seconds here, right? So we're using both setInterval and setTimeout here. So if you try to run this, you notice we get it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and stop. Wait, why didn't we get it the fifth time? Because we have here 1 second, and after 5 seconds it should actually stop. It should actually stop executing. But why did we get? Why didn't we get the actual 5th time to print on the screen? That's because the 5th time is after 5,000 milliseconds, and that actually exactly overlaps with our set timeout. So when that happens, basically the engine kind of decides for us which one has priority, and in our case the set timeout function had priority, so it actually executed first, and then the set interval did not execute because we have cleared this interval. Now, one more useful thing you can do with the set timeout function is create a thread.sleep inside the JavaScript. Remember, JavaScript doesn't really have a thread.sleep because most of the JavaScript programs are for the web, and so the UI is calculated there, and you don't really want to block the UI event chain. But we can create our own function if we really want to and need to, using await and async. Basically, here I have a function that says snooze, a sort of sleep, for the amount of milliseconds we give it, and this guy returns a promise that all it does is resolve the promise itself after a certain amount of time, right? So it just kind of calls the set timeout function, and that's it. That's all this one does. And if we try to wait on this snooze function, it's going to wait however much we give it here. So it's basically a thread.sleep in this case. I had to wrap it inside an async call here, but that's fine, because if we try to run this, you'll notice that the instant message pops out instantly, but then we are actually waiting 1 second. If we change this to, for example, 3 seconds, well, you'll notice a difference. We're gonna actually wait 3 seconds exactly, which is quite nice. First, I hope you got something out of this video. Remember the set timeout and the set interval functions. If you actually need any of these, don't forget about them, and you can also clear them using the clear timeout and clear interval. Leave the questions down in the comments below, and well, see you guys next time. Take care.